everybody, and welcome to King Arthur and Lady of the Lake. Today, we are going to be talking into a topic that already has Michael feeling that he needs to hide behind his microphone in case he says something.
No. Anyway, they'll see what happens before this in our reel that we release at some point.
So today's episode is called Understanding Love Through the Feminine. So
because men can't feel love. Masculine and love don't connect, do they, Helen?
But this is where we have the difference of opinion. In each of us, there is a masculine, feminine force. So you're talking about masculine, not men.
Yes, I can see the distinction. I can definitely recognize the distinction. Do you think that these are the biases that we get sometimes stuck in, where we associate compassion and love with, and these are the biases, because when we say feminine, immediately the mind goes to women, right? This is the unconscious bias, not necessarily my perspective, but the unconscious bias is that we talk about feminine, immediately most people connect with women. And so when we talk about love in the context of the feminine, then most people are going to think, oh, well, women love, maybe men don't.
Right. So you've launched in straight away.
I'm not going to muck around with this one.
I don't want you to. Let me frame what I'm talking about with this, right?
All right, yep.
So with studies of Jungian psychology, there's the understanding of the masculine feminine dynamic, and within both of those, they reside within both of us. So men's masculine feminine dynamic, and also women have the masculine feminine dynamic. And within that, as we've talked about quite often, is the capacity for good and evil to exist. And so within that as well, there's the feminine good and evil within the man and the woman, and the masculine good and evil within the man and the woman. So it's about that. But what's really interesting, what I wanted to call attention to in the understanding love piece, is that, did you know that in Sanskrit language, which is the base for most Indian languages, there is 96 terms for love, right?
Yep. And
then within Persian, ancient Persian language, there is 80 words for love. And in Western society, in English, there's only one.
Yep. I've heard this.
Yeah. So for example, it means that when I say my love for my dad, I would have a word for that. My love for my mum, there'd be a word for that. There would be a word for loving the sunset, for loving my daughter, for loving a pet, for loving this day and this experience.
Whereas, I was going to, sorry. No, keep going. Yeah.
So in the English language, we just say, I love that, love you dad, love you mum, love your sunset. Oh, I had such a beautiful day, I loved it. And so I'm reading a book at the moment with Robert A. Johnson, who is a kind of a studier of Jungian philosophy, and he speaks into this about the fact that it is so difficult to understand our emotion when we don't even have different words for it. How can we possibly understand the level of emotion and the capacity for emotion when we only have one word to explain it?
And so it's all about context, isn't it?
And so within that as well is the discussion around the masculine and feminine. And so within that, here we go. Look, the smirk's happening already.
No, there's no smirk. There's no smirk, Helen. Come on.
So
you promised.
This book that I've been reading, which is amazing, talk about femininity lost and regained. And it is about the need for femininity to come back into society. And that the loss of femininity, the loss of femininity is one of the reasons that we're having such a hard time at the moment. So Within,
So
and yes,
why
I'm
don't
going
you,
to say a word that
you're
you
going
hate.
to, don't say it.
You know, I'm going to say it, the
You,
patriarchy. Within the patriarchy that you might not acknowledge, but within the patriarchy that is in most Western society, it is run on boy psychology, on all of the kind of, you know, egotistical traits of the masculine. And that is both men and women in that space. I'm not talking about men, I'm talking about masculine, feminine.
mm-hmm.
So within that space of the patriarchy, most people are operating from the masculine space, either within themselves as women or within themselves as men. And within that, we see all that kind of like, you know, it's all action based and it's this and that. But it also leaves us with the shadow side of that as being quite cold and unfeeling.
So for everybody listening, I'd like to address the unconscious bias that's probably happening in most people at the moment, in a lot of people who could be watching. And that is that when we talk about the patriarchy, we're not talking about a tyrannical, male-driven society where men overpower women and are somehow dominating women. That's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is the masculine energy that exists in both. And I was only joking, mucking around and being silly before, but we're talking about the masculine energy in men that exists in men and women, and the immature expression of that. So the immature masculine expression in men and women, which has sought to control and dominate in our society in different ways. And so we're seeing that, we even see that, and you might, in fact, I don't know whether you'll agree or disagree with this. We'll find out in a moment. So we might even say that the immature masculine is at play right now in the far left feminist agenda. I might even say that, and you're nodding, so I'm going to take that as agreement.
I'm just listening.
There was a definite nod there. And so what we're talking about when we talk about the patriarchy is we're talking about the immature masculine, which is not exclusive to men. So I just wanted to contextualize all of that for everybody, because when we talk about patriarchy, the unconscious bias is that people go, "Oh, you're saying that men have controlled society for however many years," and that's not where we're going.
That's right. But the basis of patriarchy was built on boy psychology, which is that immature masculine.
Yes, of course.
And
Yeah.
that's what's caused a lot of the issues that we're now dealing with as a society, and that's pretty recognized. So, but what's interesting to me is this inability to connect true levels of emotion to love, because there's not enough kind of love words to go around to actually be able to encourage us to communicate about love without using just one simple word. So within that, we have all of the qualities of the feminine, and the feminine is the embodiment of love. And that's across the board of the goddess, and the god was the kind of the warrior, and the goddess, and all of the ancient history as we see the woman was the Venus, the embodiment of love. Within that, there was the nurturing, the mother, the seductress as well, and also like the enchanter and all that kind of thing. Whereas the man brought the action, the hero, the courage and the bravery, and also dedication to the female. And so there's this really beautiful kind of balance between the masculine and feminine in that. And then in turn, when the man is able to embrace his feminine, it means that he's then able to visit the qualities of the feminine, which is to own his own ability to love, to be able to express that, to be able to nurture and hold and protect the woman using those feminine traits. But as we know, as we've moved through in this society that we've been in, there has been the poo-pooing of the feminine trait in men, and that it wasn't allowed. And
I would agree
so,
with that.
and there was an example of this in even in Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet, where, and I've written this down actually, there was a we'll have no woman law here, is what one of the major characters said. And what that meant is that there'll be no love at the expense of our masculinity.
Yeah.
And that is what I'm talking about, that kind of like, it's all masculine or all feminine. And that is where the issue is. To understand love in its truest form is to look at life through the eye of the feminine in whatever gender you might be in.
And if we explore that even more deeply, if we go even deeper into this rabbit hole, we might also then talk about archetypes. And one of the major archetypes is the lover archetype, right? And I know we're going to talk about this book at some point in the near future when we're both finished reading it again. King, warrior, lover, magician.
Yes.
But if we just focus on the lover archetype, of course, the lover archetype is seen in men and also in women and also in men. And what that is the embodiment of, it's everything that we feel and how we express from a perspective of compassion, empathy, and love, right? That's the lover archetype. And we can express that in different relationships in our lives, whether it's with our intimate partner, whether it's with a good friend, whether it's with our children, siblings, and love spreads across all these different relationships that we have in life. And it's really about embodying an archetype, isn't it? When we go deeper and start to delve underneath the masculine and the feminine and what we attribute as feminine characteristics and masculine characteristics, and we go deeper underneath that in more embodiment stuff, we're talking about archetypes really. And the lover archetype is what we're talking about here, and how it can be misrepresented in society, and then the shadow of that as well. Interesting, those richer cultures on our planet that you talked about before, they have all these different words for love. And we have one expression of it in Western society, right? Which is very limiting in our belief of what love even means.
Yeah. That's right. And that's what I found so fascinating. I was just like, wow, imagine the pressure being taken off for us to say that we love, like as a man, that we love another man. Imagine if there was another word that a man could say that they loved another man without it having just that one word connotation of loving the woman.
Yep.
I love you, my wife, or I love you, my husband. And then saying that to a same-sex friend, especially from the masculine, it's like, oh, that's a bit weird. But imagine if we had all of that, where there was no need to feel like that, because I certainly don't think it's weird, but I know there's that kind of uncomfortableness about the expression of love. But it's because it's seen as one thing, because we only have one word to identify it. And so I find that really interesting that within these beautiful cultures, they embrace the feminine across their culture as well, and revere the feminine. And that the man actually is really comfortable with the feminine within him. So they're really, and these are really close-knit family units. They have these really rich cultures where there's lots of dance, there's a lot more romance, and everybody's a lot more comfortable with these ways of going about it, the understanding.
And the Europeans, the Europeans are like that anyway. Europeans, it's very much built into the culture. Love and full expression is very much built into the culture to its demise sometimes, I think, when you talk about intimate relationships and how people can be, quite liberated. Let's call it liberated over in Europe in regards to this. And I think that's probably why we have such strong beliefs around things like monogamy in our Western world. Not that there's anything wrong with monogamy. I'm just saying that I think we have such strong beliefs around it because we only have this one expression of love. Like it's very difficult for a man, for instance, or for a woman in Western society to say, I love you to a member of the opposite sex that is not a family member or a partner. It would be very difficult for that to happen without it feeling like they were somehow doing the wrong thing. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And what's really beautiful is kind of understanding love through feminine grace, I suppose you'd say. It's
Yep.
almost about, as a masculine, the masculine then within the man, allowing feminine qualities within that. So I think it would be incredible for men to be able to be given the capacity of more language, to get away from the shadow side of the main traits. So, for example, as we were saying before, so for the man, it's about action and the warrior and the hero and the brave, courageous man. To then only have that one expression of love, the other side of that would be kind of the ego and that kind of cold, critical side of men when they're embarrassed or shamed or in fear of something. And so the feeling of that then stops them from owning the feminine. And within that, then we get that real breakdown in relationships where some men cannot go into the softness of their own feminine to resolve issues or to have a communication that's difficult or something
Mm,
like that.
mm, mm.
And then in turn, the feminine, often then the opposite of the kind of the nurturing, the lover, the mother, you know, and the seductress, you've got that kind of capacity for wrath, you know.
So here's what I was
So
going to ask you. If we
mm,
put aside men, women, feminine, masculine for a second, um, what would you say the shadow of love is?
mhm.
Because I've got a good word
A
here that I
great
wrote down before.
question. The shadow of love is certainly not hate, I don't believe. I mean, there's no stronger emotion than love than hate, they say. So that when you really, really love someone, when you have an argument, you like really, really hate them because it's the opposing force. However, one of the things that I find with love is almost the destruction.
So
Love is
I
either
might,
all encompassing
yeah,
or all destroying.
yeah, I would agree with that. I would say
Mm,
that I would say that the shadow of love is perhaps a sense of entitlement, perhaps ownership, um, bordering on narcissism.
mm, mm,
That's what I might say the shadow of love is.
mm.
Would you
Yeah.
agree with that?
Yeah. And this is the thing, is that then, you know, you're looking at the masculine and feminine qualities and then trying to embody the kind of mature feminine and masculine embodied in each person. So, because,
Yep.
you know, we're talking about men, women, but, you know, men and men in their relationships, women and women in their relationships, men and sons or daughters, and women and mothers and sons and daughters. So, all of the relationships that we have,
Mm.
unless we actually embody the masculine and feminine and all that means, I don't know whether, if you're in your full masculine, you can really love truly, because love takes a softness that comes from feminine trait. And equally, I don't think the feminine can exist without the masculine, because it's the courage and the ability to move forward and to have action and move into difficulty and through fear.
I might say, I might counter that by saying that it's not so much the energy of love, but more the expression of love. So the masculine expression of love is would be providing for his family. A masculine expression of love might be protecting his family when they need protecting. A masculine expression of love might be standing for the values within his family unit, the people that are important to him. So these could be expressions of love, but they're not necessarily what most people may call feminine expressions,
Mm,
because they're providing, protecting, um, I guess taking a really powerful stand for something. And they would be expressions of love from a man's perspective, and the masculine within a man's perspective, right?
mm,
Whereas a woman might might express love in her nurturing way of being. So I think love, the word love is very limiting in many ways. And you've identified that already by saying that we literally have one word for it in our Western world,
mm,
whereas in other cultures, there are dozens of words for the word love. But I think there are variations of its expression. And I think we can really find expressions of love in the masculine in different ways than we do in the feminine. I don't think it doesn't exist. I just think the expression is different.
And I totally agree. But what's interesting about that is that in a relationship, when it goes badly, we actually need the opposing force within us. So for men,
Yeah.
they need the feminine to be able to fall into the softness to resolve, and to be able to have the understanding and the compassion to hold the space for the woman. And for women, they need to have the courage to face the difficulty, to
Totally.
face the confrontation. A lot
Yeah.
of women do the nice girl thing and then just back out of the disagreement or of the conflict, and that's how a lot of what our relationships look like. The masculine is the one who kind of calls the shots in the house, and then the ladies say, you know, he never does anything, you know, he just sits around, he's controlling, he doesn't let me go anywhere, he's really jealous, and all of that kind of stuff. And it's kind of like, that's a typical man who hasn't embodied the feminine because he's acting from jealousy, from overprotection, which is the male trait. And then that's a woman not stepping into her power to say, no, actually, I'm going to be doing this, and I'd like you to help in the house, and you know, this is what's going to happen. So it's the feminine kind of letting into, I don't want any trouble, I just leave it. So there's this interesting mix of, should you really want to run a relationship to its best capacity, then we have to really come from both spaces. And as well as a parent, I don't know about you, but my God, if I was in my full feminine nurturing mum all the time, my God, as a sole parent, my kids would be a nightmare. You know, I have to step into that. Yes, I'm their protector, and I have to go into action to be courageous and brave to kind of say, no, you're not going to do that, and to really be able to discipline them in a way that is effective. It comes from an embodied masculinity within my feminine. So there's a softness about my approach, but I wouldn't get anywhere if I just stayed in that watery, you know, feminine. So when I look at masculine, feminine qualities, I look at the fact that you have a strong feminine and a strong masculine, and then you embody the other qualities within that. And that's where I think you really do get that, the richness in the expression of love. And for me, the understanding of love is in those moments.
Yes, I would agree with that. And I would like, because I'm all about words and language and what they can mean to us. And so I think there can be expressions of strength in both the feminine and the masculine. But I really believe that in order for us to contextualize this properly and put some perspective around this, I think it's really important to identify that there are mature and immature expressions of both. And so and we have that all within us, because we have the little boy energy, the little girl energy, which is the immature masculine and feminine. Then we have the adult energy of the expression of both of them as well. And I think the challenge for adults is to learn to be able to allow the flow between all of them, and the discernment to know which needs to come out when, which needs to be expressed when, and in what context. And I think that then starts to form a more integrated and embodied human being.
Yeah, for sure.
What would you say?
Yeah. And one of the things that I've been reading with Robert Johnson, you know, he talks about, until we really re-invite the feminine back in to the patriarchy and to the kind of standard way of being, we're not going to be able to find the balance of peace that we want. And we are, and you know, this is from my words, I believe the mental health crisis that we're having at the moment is the disembodying of the feminine trait, because men are depressed and suicidal and struggling when they are going through emotional crisis, because they're not able to connect to the feminine to feel it. They're coming from their masculine at it. And it's just so full on and hard to take, because all of the narrative has been that you're not allowed to feel. and all of the feminine has been disallowed for centuries now. And so now we're asking in the 21st century, no, come on, embody the feelings, which what we're saying is we're inviting back in feminine quality. And that is what's needed in order to traverse mental health.
Some may say, Helen, some may say that we perhaps have, the pendulum may have swung too far, and we have too much femininity in society, and now the masculine is in society is resisting and pushing back. And so what we are seeing is not that we need to embody, not that we need more feminine characteristics in society, but we need to learn how to embody the feminine and the masculine better in society, rather than allowing the pendulum to swing so far both ways at different stages of our societal evolution. And so some may say that it's like the pendulum has actually swung too far over towards the feminine, forcing and feminizing men. And some may say, I'm not saying that, but some may say that, and I might agree with them in some context.
There it is.
But having said that, I can understand that there are more expressions of the immature feminine and the immature masculine in our society than the mature versions of both. And I think that's where we get our unconscious bias from.
That's exactly right. That's what I was just saying. I think the embodiment of feminine energy is so new in men that they don't quite know how to do it yet. And so therefore they'll be seen as this feminizing, but actually men are trying to work out how to have the emotion without going too far. And some men are saying, I absolutely resist feeling my feelings. I absolutely resist. I'm going to be stoic, and I'm going to be this masculine man, and I'm going to be the warrior and the fighter. And that in turn then develops into really difficult traits, which normally can end up either in a suicide or in a domestic violence situation where there's no embodiment of resolving emotion. So we do need to get to a point where we can resolve emotion, and it's about actually learning how to have a healthy dose of the feminine for men. And with women, as we were talking about before, as this kind of, we have this understanding and compassion and love, but when we're going off into corporate and we're now all over doing unbelievable things that we've always wanted to do, and that we can handle them all through, like we've talked before, the First World War, women were stepping up and doing it. But there's an embodiment of the masculine that brings kind of that ugly masculine trait, which is the competition, the egotism, and all of that kind of stuff, rather than bringing just the courage and the confidence and the belief, which is the healthy masculine. So I think you see these things in our society now where women are moving more over to masculine and men are struggling to know what to do with the feminine. So in a way, we do need to bring the feminine back to
I think the feminine is well back.
Yeah.
I think the feminine, I think what's happened is that the feminine energy is now so pronounced in society that men feel overpowered by it, and they feel almost overwhelmed by the feminine in every aspect of society, that they feel like their masculinity is under attack. When it's really not the case. It's more about learning how to, and we see this, we talk about unconscious bias, but the fact of the matter is this: we don't see men pushing a feminist agenda. We see women pushing a feminist agenda and forcing men to support them. Otherwise, they scream sexual harassment and discrimination and all sorts of different things in the workplace, in society. We're going way off track here again, because we were talking about love and the expression of love in society. And if I were to bring it back to that, where I would say that we have the biggest problem is that men and the masculine within men resists the expression of love because it feels like a feminine trait, when in fact it can actually be a really good expression of masculinity as well. And where I think we need to have a better discussion around this is not around healthy femininity and healthy masculinity and toxic of both as well. We need to find a place of embodiment. And this is where even you and I don't know if you've noticed in this conversation, but we have slipped into unconscious bias sometimes too in this conversation. And so even we have to be really careful of dogma and indoctrination and conditioning and all of that sort of stuff, because when we start using words like healthy and toxic, and we haven't used the word toxic, but healthy is being used, we start to stray from embodiment, because then we're judging it. Then we're judging the embodiment as something, whether it's good or bad. We used those words before as well. We used good and evil as opposed to mature and immature. And so I think this is really a good place where we can go, let's bring it all back in. And we talked about love and then the shadow of love. And how do we start to understand what that means in terms of embodiment and integration in people, as opposed to going into, feminine, masculine, feminist agendas, all sorts of different things, because I think we can get lost in all that.
I cannot possibly not answer that whole thing that we just mentioned, because I have a lot moving through my mind around that as you were talking, and hearing and thinking about what you were saying as like, yeah, how do I feel about that? And how do I feel about that? Because I could feel it inside, when you were talking. And I suppose I disagree with the fact that we're over feminized. If anything, I think there's such a small portion of our society sits where you refer to, with women being feminists. Most women I know have applauded me for the work that I do with men. Most women are just so wanting to champion the men in their life. I know there's a lot of narratives, but it's kind of like a narrative that's become part of almost a joke that we talked about the other week about the double standards, and this is a part of our changing society.
But just to be clear on that, I don't think all women are feminists.
No,
and
I know,
don't think
but
all women are damaging.
Men are being feminized, and there's a lot of women pushing that onto men, and and so a lot of women as well are asking their men to step up.
Absolutely.
A lot of women are saying, come on, I want you to hold me. I want you to be a man. I want you to be strong. And I want you to, so I don't agree that men are being kind of emaciated by all these strong women. I think in a way, these strong women are a bit lost looking for men to support them, because men are going, what the hell? And I think that's an over embodiment of the masculine rather than a push of the feminine. I think for women have had to step into masculine to kind of fight back. And then now it's time for us to drop the masculine. And again, like I say, bring in the understanding of love and bring in more feminine to the woman as well as to the man. So that's the relaxing. But I also wanted to talk about the good, evil, the, healthy, whatever. I very rarely use the word toxic because I don't agree with its use most of the time. But actually, I don't think it is about immature and mature. I think, like we've talked about before, for me, my belief is that even in mature masculine, mature feminine, we have the capacity for evil. And we've talked about that in shadow, that to us to fully be able to live our gifts and to bring ourselves fully, we need to understand the depth of our personality, which is within masculine or feminine, within mature or immature. We have the capacity to behave well or to really not behave well.
We have the capacity.
That is a personality thing where we need to understand that that's possible. And that's a deep part of Jung's work as well, as we know, is that it's the kind of integration of good and evil within that. So I don't think it is mature. I think it is a battle of like, what am I going to choose?
That's what I was going to say, discernment, right? So, but you don't see discernment in immaturity, do you? You don't see, like, for instance, let's talk about just our development as human beings. You don't see kids having very good levels of discernment, whereas you see more mature people being able to discern very well. And this is where maybe this is another one of those times when we have to agree to disagree, because I'm really strong in the fact that there is mature and immature expressions of masculine and feminine in both of us, in both men and women, because yes, we have the capacity for good and evil. We all do. And the mature masculine and the mature feminine knows how to discern between the two, right? We understand we have the capacity, and then being able to choose is discernment. And that's an expression of a mature person.
Yeah, no, I hear what you mean. Yeah, I can see what you're saying. And when we're looking at the masculine feminine traits, certainly they do appear in whatever kind of psychology we're operating from.
Yeah.
But I suppose it's about, even in the mature expression, we understand we have the capacity for it.
Totally. But we discern, and we choose differently than what we would if we were coming from an immature one of those energies.
Yeah,
right?
no,
Yeah.
I get that.
Yeah.
So I think,
So we should bring it back, Helen. We should bring it back,
yeah,
because this conversation was about love.
but
And
all of that is an expression of love, isn't it? Because then
totally
we
is.
we
Totally
look
is.
at within us, the shadow and the kind of integration of that is about self-love and the understanding of love within us. And for men as well, that masculine in men, the self-love kind of thought process and the kind of capacity to embody that, it's very difficult for men unless they have that ability for compassion and for general appreciation, which comes from a feminine trait, which is embodied. So really, I suppose my whole thought around this topic, which I thought would be as meaty as it's been,
Absolutely.
is that to actually be able to reintegrate the feminine in a really embodied way in both men and women, I think it would enable us to understand love in a new way. I think that where we are not able to fully engage in a loving way, when we're not able to discuss on a deep level and to show up with uncomfortable kind of like that, I want to tell my feelings, but I don't know how. If we can invite the feminine, healthy feminine, and I'm saying healthy feminine, into be able to express love, knowing that we've only got the one word, we do need to be able to embody that. And so for me, if we can understand love, that the real kind of embodiment of love comes from a base of the feminine trait within both sexes.
Yeah. And also understanding that there are good quality masculine traits in men and women, which can also be expressions of love too. And sometimes they go unrecognized.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Because the masculine doing doesn't often come across as expressions of love, because the doing is out there doing something, in some activity or task, which doesn't appear to be directly related to, the intimate relationship or the family or whatever. But it actually is, from a masculine perspective, it actually is, because it's in service of the greater good, which is the family and the relationships. So it's a big discussion, Helen. We've gone way longer than what we usually do in these, but you're right. We put some meat on those bones, didn't we? That was great.
Yeah, I loved that. It was really interesting because it's really nice to kind of, have that kind of tennis table game about it, because it is a controversial topic and it's up for discussion, because really it's only ever in the eyes of the person who's really making the discernment as to what really rings true for them. So then in hearing that information, then you can get to make your own decisions around it, which is beautiful.
And so if we were to wrap up and conclude, I might suggest that people could take away from this that it might be helpful for you to observe your behavior, your expressions of love, and do you actually show love and express love in mature ways? Do you feel like you're embodied in your expression? Do you feel like, let's look at just people in general rather than separating us into male and female. Do you think you embody feminine and masculine traits in a way that is fully integrated, or do you think that you are unintegrated in your expression of one or the other, which makes you a little bit more unaware and disembodied than what you could be? And is there room for improvement? And if there is, then all it can do is enrich and enhance your relationships and your life.
Yeah. And in looking at, just touching on something that you mentioned earlier about men feeling like, oh my God, the feminine's coming for me, to look at feminine in a new way, to look at feminine rather than being like this onslaught of feminine power, to look at the softness within the feminine, to look at feminine in the soft space of compassion and love, and how you bring that to the world. And then honoring that within you, knowing that that part of you is going to be capable for peace and for healing and for all of the other things, to integrate the absolute strength of you on the other side of that.
Yep. And know how to temper all of that with the resilience and strength that's required for good quality discernment, which are masculine traits. So it's about embodiment, isn't it? Yep.
Yeah.
Cool.
Fabulous. Okay.
Excellent.
Well, thanks, Michael.
Thank you, Helen. And we'll see you next week. And next week, we're going to be talking about fear.
Understanding fear through the eyes of the masculine.
Oh my God. Can we just go understanding fear?
Nope.
Oh, let's talk about this next week. I want to know why you associate fear with the masculine.
I don't. We'll talk about that at the time.
Oh, okay. Lots of love, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.